Betsy. All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Life Changing Books. We are live on YouTube and Facebook. Thank you guys so much for being here. And I'm joined with the wonderful Diva Diaz.
Hi, everybody. This is our launch of this. How exciting. We're going to be coming to you guys regularly with these book reviews of the incredible Access Consciousness books that we love, that are completely life-changing, as the title would indicate. And, we thought it would be really fun to share some of our stories, share bits and excerpts from the books, and just some of the tools that are really so simple, so easy to institute. And we thought, why wait until you have the book when you can watch this and get some of the tools, some of the benefits already?
Exactly. We'll share the benefits and then you can go out and read later because
Exactly.
we love these books and they've changed so much for us. And there is translation, just so you guys know. Awesome. So what are we talking about today, Diva? Which book?
Oh my goodness. We are talking about Would You Teach a Fish to Climb a Tree? Which is just one of my favorites. It's a topic that is very dear to my heart as a person that was diagnosed with autism in adulthood. This book, well, the subtitle is A Different Take on Kids with ADD, ADHD, OCD, and Autism. And it's by Anne Maxwell, Gary Douglas, and Dr. Dain Heer.
I love it. So, as somebody who was diagnosed with autism, because you're not the typical idea of what we think about when we think about the picture of autism. And so, can you talk a little bit about what that was and how this book and the X-Men series and Access has transformed the way that you think about this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this book was one of my first kind of introductions into neurodiversity, actually, and what it is to not be neurotypical. So to be an X-Men or be a fish that's trying to climb a tree. So whether, you have been officially diagnosed or not, or the people in your life have or haven't been, you might recognize different elements of yourself or of your kids in this. And the incredible thing is that through these tools, what you'll start to see is that everything that is labeled as a wrongness is actually a huge strength and capacity that we have because of that neurodiversity, because of the capacity to think and receive information in a completely different way to most of the world. So this book really dives into what those different things can look like on the outside and how you can start to actually access the incredible abilities behind all of that, really.
It's amazing. I mean, this book was incredibly, and I'm going to use the word healing. It was very healing for me because sometimes the amount of information and brain chatter that I had and still sometimes have going on was so much that I just wanted to take a hammer and smash my head because it was so intense. And I loved the practices and the stories in this book because they really helped me realize that I'm not normal, and yet what I have going on is not, it's not just me, and I can actually use different tools to calm myself down and make my life easier and then actually start to thrive through a lot of these tools.
Yeah, exactly. And I will say that the wonderful thing about this book is that it really is not designed to try to add a lot of glamour to the topic of labels of disability. It's not saying, oh, your kid's having this difficulty. Well, it's amazing. It really isn't about that. It is super pragmatic. It's got tools in it and different techniques and perspectives, brand new perspectives that you've probably not heard of, or maybe you have, but it presents things in a different way so that the things that are presenting in your kids' lives or in your life can actually be addressed really in a practical way. So again, it's not to over glorify any of that. And, there's a lot of stuff out in the world about rainbow kids and
The indigo children.
Indigo, violet. Oh my God.
Violet?
The violet kids, those purple ones. And really, at the end of the day, it's we're all kind of addressing the same thing. But I love just how how easy this is and how practical the tools are that are in
Yeah.
the book. What is one of the paragraphs or sections or chapters that you kind of
Oh,
like have
well,
enjoyed?
I really loved the chapter about the family. So there's a whole story and chapter about a family who had kids with different disabilities, and getting their kids dressed and fed and put together and off to school in the morning was really difficult.
Yeah.
And so the tool that is given in the book is put the picture of them being dressed and fed and put together and in the car ready to go to school, put that picture inside their head and you'll have an easier time. And so the parents learned this tool and applied it, and they said it was the first morning in forever that they had not had fighting, not had crying, not had wrongness. The kids were fast. They like moved from one thing to another and actually did things very easily. And with pretty much everything in this book, I see myself in it, and I think that a lot of those of you who, will read this book will see different capacities and different ways of looking at yourself in this book. It was very strong for me. Every chapter was like, "Oh, I can apply this to myself because I have this going on."
Nice.
And, not for every person all the time, but I think a lot of people, especially those who are seekers or are looking for something different or alternative, can really find something really magical in this and just really practical. And so I started doing that with myself. Like I would say, "Okay," and I would just have space because I would get so overwhelmed getting myself out of bed in the morning. And so I would just put the picture of where I needed to be and what I needed to be creating into the future and just have, like, a little conversation with myself, and it was so much easier. Everything just started to work better, and I was like, "That's just so bizarre, not something we're ever taught to do," and it, like, totally worked, and it works every time that I do it. So for me, that was really awesome.
Yeah, I love that section. And, the interesting thing was that the parents didn't necessarily believe that this approach or different way of doing this was going to work, which I have to just mention that I love. I don't, it's not that I love that they didn't believe it, but I love that you don't have to believe in it for it to actually work. A tool is a tool. It's like you don't need to believe in a hammer before you use the hammer. It's still going to hammer the nail into the wall,
Exactly.
and like one of the key things that I have found that this book gave me personally a lot of clarity with is exactly what you're saying, Julia, which is communication. Because so much of the communication that we're taught to have is very linear and very verbal. And for kids who are, X-Men, as we affectionately call them, who have perhaps these different labels of so-called disabilities, that's not their primary way of communicating. Their primary way is energy, so they will pick up people's energy, which is dictated by that person's thoughts, their worries, their emotions, what they're feeling that day. That's what dictates the energy that we actually put out into the world. And these kids will pick that up more loudly than they'll pick up the words that you're saying. And, it's been so incredible reading this book and recognizing that if you are somebody that has difficulty communicating verbally or understanding verbal instructions, there are just some incredible tools here that can assist with that. And also, being that it's Autism Awareness Month, it's super, super helpful too, because a lot of people with autism do think in pictures. And, as you mentioned, when the parents started like putting that image out there, but even just thinking of an image and then speaking to an X-Men, to one of these kids, is going to change the way that you communicate because you're now describing an image. So it makes it easier. So it's really a great way to actually bring two different forms of communication together so there doesn't need to be that conflict or that misunderstanding between people.
Yeah, that's huge. I, have been coaching they gave me a title finally because there's already a director and an assistant director at the school, theater program. So I joined the troupe. So there's sort of 3 of us directing the play. They gave me the title of dialogue coach because I help the kids with
Oh.
their lines and their language. So I go, it's 4 months out of the year, and I've done it the last 2 years, and I go and I help them put on the school play. And after reading this book and, like, having the tools in the book, like, what I can contribute to the kids who are of all different shapes and sizes and colors, and every type of kid with every type of background and every type of energy you could ever imagine. And a lot of what I am being is really quite silent. Like, I don't actually go there and talk a lot. It's just I'm just present with them, and I ask them questions about how they are and what they need and how they see things, and just, like, I do communicate with them in pictures and in energies, and it's just changed the scope of how things run and what can be possible. And the kids are just so grateful for me because I see them, I know how to communicate with them, I don't put anything on them.
Mhm.
And I got a whole lot of that information from this book and from the tools of access consciousness, just to be space and to communicate with somebody, especially a child, to, well, anybody, but in this case, a child, who, in a way that they would like to be communicated with, and based on their different capacities, skills, ways of thinking, levels of what we would call disabilities, and just going tapping into their world, being present with it, and then delivering to them what they need to have. And just their level of peace and gratitude that that creates is
Mm.
just blows you away. And that's what we can all be when we learn to function from these principles.
Absolutely. And I love that you said, communicate with them in a way that works for them, because when somebody's speaking your language, you do have a level of ease and peace. But if somebody is speaking to you in a completely different language that you're not speaking, the world becomes a very difficult place. And that's essentially what we're doing when we're trying to get these kids to behave in a linear way or follow verbal instructions. For them, it doesn't make sense. It's not that they need to try harder or focus more. That's just not their language. So what if we could actually start to learn what their language is, perhaps learn, a couple of things from them as well in terms of capacities. But I also like that you said, the thing about being space. And I think one of the things that I've come across with working with, well, parents and family members, or just people that are surrounded by these kids, is that it is so easy to fall into this mindset that there's a problem or that there's something wrong with the kid. And I have to say that the very freeing thing that first jumped out at me about this book and the tools of X-Men in Access is that there isn't the point of view that there's anything wrong. Again, not to over glorify and to say, your kid is now the best kid in the universe. It's not that. But really, what if there is no problem? And it's so easy to then think, well, okay, that's great, but I'm not quite there yet. So how do I go from thinking there's a problem to not? And one of the greatest tools is just to start asking a question, and the book is filled with different questions that you can ask in different situations to begin to get yourself out of those judgments and into a different possibility. And a very simple one is just really, what if there's nothing wrong here? Just what if? Just what if this isn't a problem? So if this weren't a problem, what else would be possible here? And as you start to do that, what happens is you begin to relax, you begin to receive in a different way. And again, the kids who communicate energetically are going to pick up on that energy that, again, has been dictated by your thoughts, your limitations, your stress, your, whatever beliefs you've got going on. And as you begin to relax by asking a question that opens a different door, they start to relax too. Because, we've all had the experience of having somebody judge us, but pretend they're not judging us. And they're like, "Oh, it's so nice to meet you." But
Yes.
really, we know that they don't think it's nice to meet us. Well, these people face with that every single day. Every time people are like, "Oh, you're so special." Well, they know what you're really saying, okay? So once you start and you kind of like take one step back, go back to basics, go back and start to address the energy that you've got going on, your interaction with these kids is going to start to get a lot easier as well.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the – quotes from the book that I really like is, is don't define these children by their labels. You will cut off your receiving of what they have to give to you. See, like, it's just like you're saying, Diva, like, if you come in with a preconceived notion or an idea that there's a problem, you totally miss the gift. Instead, ask a question. What is the gift that they have that I am not receiving?
Yes.
Right, and that quote is on chapter 1 from Gary Douglas. It's so beautiful.
I love it. And it says here too, we ask that you don't see your kids as wrong, no matter what they've been labeled as. Look at your kids not from the wrongness of them, but from the rightness of them. And when you do this, you can create a completely different world for yourself, for them, and for everyone on the planet. And, you know, the interesting thing about this is the tools presented here do allow you to have like instant change, you know, instantly basically in situations. But also what they do is they start to empower your kids so that in weeks to come, in months to come, years to come, you're starting to now have this young adult grow up and be functional in the world in a completely different way. Why? Because when you begin to actually use the tools, and like I've mentioned, a lot of them are questions, like some of the questions that Julie and I have said, and many others. Kids are fast and they're smart, and they then begin to ask themselves those questions when you're not there. So it also starts to take a lot of the pressure off the parents, off the caretakers, off the teachers, off the psychologists, and, you know, everybody that's around that whole support system, because you don't have to be the one person who's constantly on top of them, showing them where to go or even asking them the questions. They then have those questions themselves, which allows them to actually function in society in a completely different way. And that's what begins to create change, you know, in terms of things like if your kid is having a panic attack in school, or if they are completely overwhelmed and they need to have some kind of like space to themselves, it actually allows them to manage that by themselves in a completely different way, or seek help, you know, because they now know that there's nothing wrong with them, and they do have a whole different set of tools available, which
Yeah.
is so powerful.
I've seen that so much with my almost 15-year-old stepdaughter. It's like having put a lot of these tools in place and paved that way. I mean, she's been doing Access since she was 2.
Mm.
It's like the level of peace in her world is amazing. And even when she doesn't have peace, like I was at the school the other day and she was like, "And boys are horrible," and, like, she was really upset, like, almost crying because the boys were making fun of her, and she just went off and off and off and off and was just going wild and was so upset, and I was just totally being space and not judging her, and then she went on and on and on, and then at the end she was like, "Thank you for listening to me."
Oh, yeah.
Like, awesome. And, like, that's all like, it's totally just about the
Mm.
space and the no judgment. And, like, how many parents I mean, we're just so taught to, like, fix the problem, you know, and
Yeah.
make our kid perfect, and it's like, you know, trust me, that's one that I had to learn because I was constantly trying to fix everything for her, and eventually I realized, just be space, and, like, she just and then she knows that there's somebody in the world who will just be there. She needed to bitch, she needed to get that out, she needed to be upset, and then
Yeah.
it's like, poof, it's gone.
Yeah, which is a huge gift, because then she knows that it's okay to be that. And I think you know, a big part of the difficulty that some of these kids face is that whatever it is that's coming up for them in the moment, they're already told that it's wrong to have that reaction. So they're already trying to avoid it while it's bubbling up inside them, and then they're trying to not have that bubble. And so it becomes this internal conflict. Whereas if
My
they
whole
just know,
childhood.
yeah, exactly. Whereas if they just know, like, okay, it's not wrong to have this, it's also probably not ideal, but it actually puts them in a state of action where they're not just reacting to themselves or to their environment, but they're actually going, okay, this is
Mm.
what's going on. I can feel it coming, I can perceive it, and now what are my tools? So it's actually, it creates so much more beyond just those moments where, like you did, you were like, okay, let me just listen to my daughter. Like, I'll hear you out. That's okay. There's nothing wrong here. Next time, she might notice that and go, oh, yeah, maybe that's okay. Maybe I'll just jump to the end
Yes.
where I've actually got a different possibility or a different question.
I love that, and I love what you said about it about the child being able to go into action. Like, because there is, like, my whole brain was always like conflict. I'm wrong for this. I'm wrong for not this. I'm wrong,
Mm.
total conflict. And even if you just take away one half of those conflicts, it becomes an action. That's
Yeah,
really, I never thought of it that way. It's so cool.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome. So for you, Diva, what is one of your favorite parts of the book?
Goodness. I'm just leafing through it and I've been doing it at least for a couple of days and just remembering like, oh, this page is amazing and this story is amazing.
Yeah.
I'd say that the one that is probably the most life altering for me, not only personally, but in, as an access facilitator and just dealing with people in life, is chapter 8 about picking up other people's thoughts, feelings, and emotions.
Mm.
And there's a quote here by Gary Douglas, who, of course, is the founder of Access Consciousness, who says, "What if you are far more aware than you give yourself credit for?" Um, and I was having a conversation with somebody yesterday who asked me, "What do you mean by aware? Like, what is that?" Because we can talk about that. Having done a lot of access classes, but it might not make that much sense to other people.
Yeah.
But awareness is, again, kind of touching on what we've spoken about a bit, which is beyond the obvious things. So beyond the cognitive ways or beyond the appropriate responses that you should have in different situations, beyond how you should be behaving, beyond, if somebody asks you, how are you? You should say, I'm fine, thanks. People who are X-Men are so aware, which means that they have in their mind, in their energy, just everywhere, like so much more information than just that, that they will sometimes blurt out the inappropriate thing. They will sometimes tell you exactly how you're feeling because that to them is louder than what they should be responding to, which is the question you just asked them, And so this awareness very often becomes labeled as something that's wrong or bad behavior. Whereas when you actually flip that and you start looking and going, okay, so what is this person aware of here? And you start to ask them, what are you perceiving? What are you aware of? So what are you perceiving? What happens is it allows them to sift through the information in a different way and go, oh, I'm perceiving that this person's actually very annoyed. I'm picking up their feelings and their emotions because they've got this energy of annoyance, even though they're saying, hello, how are you? And I'm supposed to respond and go, I'm fine, thanks. No, I'm not fine, actually. I can perceive how intensely angry you are right now. And so they have this level of increased and almost extreme perception, where the way that I explain it is that if a neurotypical person, let's say, lives life on a volume of 1 to 10 emotionally, in terms of thoughts, of stress, of the energy that they have every day, somebody who is an X-Men will live on a volume of 1 to 10,000. So they have a level of detail with what they are aware of every day that is actually beyond normal. And it's a huge gift, but it's only a gift if you start to pull it out and ask, well, what is this? What details do you have here? What information do you have that I'm not aware of? And I remember my mum actually being so brilliant and always asking me this when I was a kid and asking, okay, so, well, what did you get about that person? Because I thought they were nice, but you reacted in a very different way. So what are you aware of? And I'd be like,
Oh, no,
well,
awesome, mom.
this, and this. Yeah. And so, but what it does when you ask your kids those questions, it begins to put into their universe, if you like, the sense of, oh, I have awareness. I have my own awareness and my awareness is valuable because you're asking me about it. Okay, the next time I'm going to trust my awareness because one, I have it, and two, it's valuable. And so if you're asking me, I'm going to trust it too. And you start to create this incredibly empowered individual bit by bit that knows that the things that they're picking up on, like people's energies and thoughts, because they are extremely hyper aware of those things. It's not a wrongness that they have. It's not a thought that they're having or a feeling or emotion that they're having. They are just sensing it in a very exaggerated and extreme way, but they don't need to be at the effect of it. And that really comes from acknowledging that they are aware of other people and of what other people have going on and giving them the question, okay, so what are you perceiving? The next time that shows up for them, they start to ask themselves, what am I perceiving?
That's like the greatest gift you can give, not just a kid. It's great when you start them when they're a kid, but like anybody. Like I constantly have to remember to ask the people in my life questions about all, like anybody in my life. ask them questions about what's going on for them, what they're aware of, and it just creates such they're so grateful because nobody really asks anybody questions about themselves or what they're aware of. Everybody's kind of trying to make themselves feel good and be right and try not to be
Mhm.
wrong, and everybody kind of is just dealing with themselves, not actually reaching out to somebody else and asking a question.
Yeah, and also we tend to walk around thinking that everybody thinks the same way that we do, and that's just not
Mhm.
true.
So true.
And, but unless you're asking somebody, "Hey, how are you perceiving this? How are you picking this up? What is this to you? How does this look in your mind? Like, what are you seeing this as?" Unless you're asking those questions, you're just gonna try and get that person to climb a tree, and they might be a fish, you know? And so by actually asking them questions, it actually also indicates your level of intelligence by recognizing that you are not the end all and be all in the way that you function, but somebody else might have a different way of functioning, and that you might be able to access some of that too and create greater ease for everybody. So it's super helpful in family situations, in all kinds of relationships, of course, in education as well, because it actually is really acknowledging that there is a completely different way of functioning that isn't wrong, it's just different.
Gosh, that's so beautiful. There's just so much available with this stuff.
Yeah, there really is. So you guys, please get the book. You can get it online. You can get the ebook. You can order the physical book as well. It's such a great
And
resource.
yeah, did you say audiobook? It is an audiobook too, which is great.
Yes.
It is a wonderful it is a wonderful audiobook. I've listened to it, and loved listening. Anne Maxwell reads it, and she does a great job, so I
That's
recommend
so
that too.
cool. Yes.
Awesome. So, I just a couple things that I wanted to make you guys aware of is it's Autism Awareness Month, in case we haven't mentioned that, and that's why we're talking about this book. And there's a special landing page dedicated to Autism Awareness Month. Awareness Month. And Dr. Dain here is going to be doing a talk about your difference and your capacities, and that's going to be in a couple days on April 7th. So we also invite you to listen to his talk. And thank you guys so much for being here, and thank you, Diva.
Thank you as well. And we'll see you all next time with another incredible Access Consciousness book. So watch this space.
Awesome.
See
Thanks,
you soon,
everybody.
everybody. Bye bye.